If nothing in your life is changing, it's not the world. It's the code that you're still running. See, from the moment that we're born, we are born whole. So we have this wholeness to us. And our original coding is nothing but check marks where we know that we're worthy. We know we're loved. We know we're abundant. We know that there's nothing but joy in our lives. We know that we're fulfilled. And it's the ultimate limitlessness. So there's no doubting involved when we're born. We just know all of these things to be true because, again, we're born whole. But over time, life starts to teach us new truths, new things that we know or believe to be true of ourselves. So this could look like maybe feeling unworthy or unloved or not good enough. Where once we had original coding and everything was wholeness, where we experienced love or fulfillment or worthiness. And now, as we experience things throughout our life, we get a new set of codes. And this might look something like this, where now we do not feel like we're good enough. So that is something that is our new truth, something that we know to be true. And alternatively, feeling good enough is no longer an option for us. We might also feel like we're not worthy. And even though those two examples, feeling not good enough and feeling not worthy, those are unfavorable, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're only going to experience unfavorable things in our life. Because if you notice here, we might feel like in our career, we're very successful. So we do not have the belief of us knowing ourselves to be unsuccessful. So the coding might look different in different aspects of your life. But either way, all of the coding that is checkmarked, the things that we know to be true for ourselves, that essentially gets entered into our computer. And what happens is the computer is then going to produce or execute that command and show us on the screen all of the things or all of the codes that we have approved for ourselves. So it doesn't matter if they're favorable or unfavorable. The program is still going to show us whatever it is that we have approved for ourselves. So that might look like this. In our life, we're going to experience things that remind us that we're not good enough, or we'll experience things that remind us that we're not worthy, or we'll experience things that remind us of how successful we are in our career. It really just boils down to whatever it is that you know as your truth. So these are all things that we know to be a fact. And everything else, all the X's, the things that we do not know or do not believe as true for ourselves, those get sent over to the trash bin. But see, the trash bin, it never gets emptied. All of the things that are in the bin, they end up staying intact. So that means that we can go into the computer and retrieve those pieces of coding that are in the trash bin, and we can recover them. Because again, think about when we're born with that wholeness, that limitlessness. That still exists, except some of the coding gets converted from I feel fulfilled to I don't feel fulfilled, or I'm so happy in my life to I'm unhappy in my life, or whatever the case is. So if you want to experience something different in your life, if you feel like the code that is running right now just doesn't work for you, or maybe there are bits and pieces that do, but others don't, then it's all about changing the program or changing the code. And the simplest way to do that is by simply asking yourself, what would I be doing right now in this moment if I had XYZ? Let's say that you struggle with feeling good about yourself. So what you tend to do is you go out and you are a people pleaser, or you feel like you always have to prove something to everyone or even to yourself. What would you be doing if you knew that you didn't have to prove yourself to anyone? You wouldn't be thinking of all the things that you could do to make yourself look good, right? You would simply just be sitting in peace, sitting in stillness, sitting in the knowing, in the hardcore fact that you are good enough already. Because again, when you go back and remember the original coding that you're born with, you know that it's everything that you could ever want for yourself. And the only reason that it changes over time is because of things that we experience in our lives. But just as easy as it was for us to have that original coding converted to something else, it's easy to go back and convert it into what we actually want. Convert it back into that original coding of wholeness. Now see, our brain likes to dramatize and overcomplicate and distort things. So whenever we try to look for a solution to a problem, in this case, I'm using the not good enough as an example, but it applies to everything. When we're looking for a solution to a problem, our brain is like, okay, well, it's definitely not going to be simple. And it tries to overcomplicate things to a point where everything just starts to become blurry. And we go out and force new things to happen for us. But usually when we do that, it doesn't feel natural and it doesn't feel nice. It doesn't feel fulfilling. And even if the things that we're trying to implement in our lives in order to see changes or to see progress, even if we are seeing progress, it usually feels at some point like we're going backwards and we fall out of that progression. But see, the reason why that's happening is because the code that you don't want is still replaying itself in the program. So think about it this way. And again, it's going to seem really simple, so don't let your mind overcomplicate it. If it's so easy for us to have a certain coding, to sit in the knowing that we're not good enough, if this is something that we believe as a fact, and we approve it being entered into our computer system, and if it's so easy for it to be shown to us on screen or in our lives, then that means that we have the answer to how do we become good enough. It's the exact same thing. It's by sitting in the knowing or knowing for a fact that you are good enough already. And so when you do that, you're essentially converting these two right here. So now good enough would be a green check mark and not good enough would be a red X. And the red X, or the not good enough, would then be dumped into the trash bin. And the good enough green check mark would be displayed on screen. Again, our mind likes to overcomplicate that. And it'll be like, okay, but I'm sure there's something more that we have to do, right? It can't just be as simple as, okay, now you're good enough. But see, it really is that simple. When you're able to shut your brain off, that's when you're really sitting in that stillness or sitting in that knowing of completeness or wholeness from the original coding, because nothing else is clouding your mind. You're not getting those past experiences being brought up in your memory. You're not getting whatever it is that triggers you to feeling not good enough in the first place. When your brain is able to just shut off for a little bit, it brings you back to who you really are, the wholeness, or in other words, your authentic self. So really all it is when you're experiencing things that you don't want, it's just the coding or your brain living out the same pattern or the same code because it's familiar to you. And the only way to change that is to break the pattern of what's familiar and bring that original code back to the forefront, back on screen. And it might feel uncomfortable at first. Like even if you're telling yourself, well, what could I do in this moment? If I felt good enough right now, what would I be doing? Because you're not going to be overthinking all the things that you should do to feel good enough. You're not going to be spiraling over the things that you've already done yesterday that made you feel not good enough. You're just going to be sitting in the knowing that you're good enough already. And you'd be going out leading your life with that. And when you lead your life from that knowing, then everything just naturally shifts or aligns in order to match that, because that's what's going to be displayed on your screen. So if you want to feel good enough, sit in that knowing and everything will naturally fall into your lap. New experiences, new opportunities, new people, new places, new things that are going to align with feeling good enough. And you're no longer going to be feeling like you have to go out and chase validation or chase milestones or achievement in order to fulfill yourself in enoughness. Now it's going to be that you already know that you're enough. So you're going to be going out into life and experiencing things from that, not experiencing things to get that. So remember, if life mirrors what you know to be true, then your only job is to know differently.